Welcome to the Lydia McGrew channel. Today I'm going to talk about something recent. I usually don't do this. I usually don't do any kind of a reaction video, a response video, that kind of thing. I don't like to get trapped in a cycle, I respond to him and he responds to me and on and on and on. But in this particular case, there was a particular detail of something that came out in the last few weeks where I thought that with one of my ugly little created charts that you've seen on this channel before, and my love of discussing epistemic routing, I could contribute something to the discussion. It'll be a couple of weeks ago by the time this is released. Use couple in a loose sense. Cameron Bertuzzi put out a video on Zeitun and the alleged apparition of the Virgin Mary there, and compared it to the evidence for the resurrection as put forward by my friend Jonathan McClatchy. Now, again, by the time this video that I'm making right now is released, not only will Cameron's video be a couple of weeks old, but there will also have been a stream with Jonathan and Tony Costa released responding to Cameron. And I'm quite sure that Jonathan is going to make the points that I'm making here, though maybe not in the same words. That hasn't been recorded yet. But I'd be very surprised if Jonathan didn't make these points in some form. I'm just going to zero in on something very specific in order to keep this video short, and also in order to use my work in epistemology in a specific, special way where I think I can contribute. In that video, which I will link, Cameron was talking about Jonathan's maximalist approach to arguing for the resurrection, which is also my approach. I coined the phrase maximal data to contrast with minimal facts, which is a more common approach to arguing for the resurrection, and that phrase, maximal data, has been picked up. And Cameron had a slide at a certain minute number, and I'll try to cue it up right there, where he said that because Jonathan is a maximalist, Jonathan is taking on this big burden in arguing for the resurrection, of arguing for gospel reliability. And that to do that, and that he had several things listed on the slide. He included a traditional authorship, undesigned coincidences, alleged contradictions that you're trying to answer claims of legendary development, dating of the Gospels. He had several things on there like that. And he said, if any one of these cannot be defended, then the case for the resurrection is weakened. And so it's this burden. Okay, that's a slight paraphrase of what he said, but you can find it on his video. And this is very strange, and it's something I've run into before. It disturbs me because it seems to be turning the epistemological situation exactly upside down from what it really is. Because what it's apparently saying is that if you think we have a lot of evidence for gospel reliability, then that's a burden. Because if you think we had a lot of evidence, then if we had less evidence, why, the case would be weaker. We would have less evidence. So it's somehow a problem to be saying we have a whole lot of evidence for gospel reliability. Now, to me, this is the epistemological equivalent of saying you're better off having hardly any friends, because if you have a lot of friends, well, then you could lose those friends. So if you start off having only a few friends, then you don't have to worry so much about losing friends, because you only have a few that you could lose. I mean, that's what it's like. Or that psychologically, you're better off thinking you only have a few friends. or being very hesitant and saying, I'm not going to claim that I have many friends. I'm going to say I'm only going to say that I have a few friends, because if I say that I have a lot of friends, then I'm going to have to worry about losing some of them. If I say that I have, 100 friends, then if I only had 99, well, 99 is less than 100, I'd have fewer friends. So if I say I have a lot of evidence for gospel reliability and that this strongly supports the resurrection, and I've explained how that works elsewhere, supporting that these were the accounts given by the eyewitnesses, and then we have to explain why they made those claims. It's this burden, because if I say I have a lot of evidence, then if I didn't have all of the evidence that I think I have, which is a lot of evidence, why then I'd have less evidence, and then the case would be weakened. So I'm better off not claiming that I have a lot of evidence to begin with. It's so strange. That's so strange. Having more evidence is not epistemologically worse than having less evidence. Okay? Let's not put ourselves into some kind of strange psychological situation where we're like, I'm not gonna even talk about having all of this evidence out there and this really strong maximal case, because then it might be taken away from me somehow, and then it would be weaker. Well, but it's better to have more evidence, just like it's better to have more friends. So to illustrate this, I'm going to do one of my things where I hold up a piece of paper to the camera. This is because I don't have the psychological energy to figure out how to edit in a image into my video and learn video editing. And I don't want to burden my friends by asking them, any of my many friends, by asking them to edit the image in. So I'm just going to hold it up. I'm also going to put it as a post on my YouTube channel. I just learned you can do that. You can make a post on your YouTube channel, and you can look at it at leisure. So here it is, and this just illustrates just two of these. You can see gospel reliability is up at the top there. Like I say, give that a good read. You can read it at your leisure in the post on my YouTube channel. So now it's a little fuzzier, but so gospel reliability is up here at the top. Now this has to do with epistemic routing, which I often talk about, and I use charts like this. Let's have gospel reliability, and then of course the resurrection would be even higher up here, because gospel reliability is going to support the resurrection. So we're going up from the bottom, the flow of evidential force here. But just for the moment, considering gospel reliability. Okay, now our ovals here represent intermediate nodes. So if you think about this one, this node is authorship, traditional authorship. And down below it, this diamond is the patristic evidence, represents the patristic evidence we have that supports the names of the traditional authors of the Gospels and that they, their relationship to Jesus. So, Luke being a friend of Paul and having access to the disciples of Jesus and so forth. Matthew actually being a disciple and John actually being a disciple and so forth. All right. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that patristic evidence is there. You don't make it disappear just by refusing to depend on it. It exists. It's out there. It's one strand among many that support gospel reliability. I'm just talking about two things here, okay? And these could be broken down further. There's patristic evidence from multiple sources. There are multiple apparent undesigned coincidences and so forth. This is simplified, and I'm only dealing with two categories that Cameron brings up to illustrate the point. The evidence of the church fathers about who wrote the Gospels isn't going to disappear just because you don't depend on it. It's out there. And it does, in fact, though indirectly, support gospel reliability, because if the authors were the people that the church fathers say they were, and this is a historical argument, by the way, this isn't because I I believe in the church, and it guards and guides all my thinking, but because these guys were closer to the time, especially when you get back to somebody like Justin Martyr, and would have more opportunity to know who wrote the Gospels. So that's some evidence about who wrote the Gospels. And if they really were those people, then that gives them a certain kind of access. Now, that doesn't mean that if I were less confident about this authorship, that like gospel reliability is going to come tumbling down, because in fact we've got this huge cumulative case, we've got all this other stuff underneath here. And so for example, suppose I concluded that the author of Acts was a companion of Paul, and I have overwhelming internal evidence. Here I'm only listing in the diamond the external evidence, but I have overwhelming internal evidence that the author of Acts was a companion of Paul, but I became doubtful that it was Luke, the physician, okay? I'm still going to have a really strong case for gospel reliability, because the internal evidence that supports this coming from a companion of Paul is still going to be there, okay? So that's the beauty of a cumulative case. Okay, is redundancy. It's like having redundancy built into your engineering, okay? But this external evidence is there. And then the thesis that these were written, in fact, by the traditional authors, that channels that toward, okay, that channels that to gospel reliability, which in turn channels it to the resurrection, to the support of the resurrection. So it's not that I say, oh my goodness, I have to take on defending authorship. What am I going to do? And then I go scrambling around and I find the patristic evidence. Instead, it's like the reason I'm thinking that they were written by these people is because I have the patristic evidence. I'm trying to account for that. Okay, the evidence is there and it supports what it supports. Okay, whereas the picture that you get from Cameron is, oh my goodness, I got to defend undesigned coincidences. Now I got to defend traditional authorship. Where can I go to find evidence for these things? Because like I'm just out of the blue deciding I'm going to defend that. No, I assert traditional authorship and I assert that there are undesigned coincidences because I have evidence for them. And so then it's exciting. It's privilege to bring that evidence to bear, where in fact it does come to bear. Okay, now the same is true of undesigned coincidences. Now what it says in this diamond down here is details in documents that appear to fit together. Now just like the patristic statements about who wrote the Gospels, those details in the documents that appear to fit together are there. They're just there. That's why William Paley developed the concept, which he called undesigned coincidences. That's why J.J. Blunt wrote a book on undesigned coincidences, because they started to notice these details in the Gospels that appeared to fit together. That's a form of internal evidence for gospel reliability. So, I don't know how you out there first heard of undesigned coincidences, but you shouldn't think of this as, well, I heard of this thing called undesigned coincidences, and then if I decided I'm a maximal data person, that means I'm committed to undesigned coincidences. Oh no, I'm taking on this weak thing that I must support, and this thing that I don't know very much about, but I've, nailed my colors to the mast, as they say, that I'm going to defend this thing out here. Now I got to go find evidence for it. Epistemologically speaking, that's not the way it works. Epistemologically speaking, the way it works is that the evidence is there in the documents, the evidence is there in the text, and you say, wow, here's this case where it looks like these details fit together. That's best explained if these are at least partially independent accounts of the same real events and the same real people. And that in turn supports the idea that the Gospels are reliable, that they're coming from people who are in the know. I could do the same thing for many other things, what I've called unexplained allusions. That's another internal argument. What I've called asides in John, that's another internal argument. Various kinds of other external evidence, like the accuracy of the locations in the Gospels and so forth. It's not that in some kind of a priori way I say, now I'm going to kind of grit my teeth. I got to defend the accuracy of the locations in the Gospels. Now I'm going to go out and run around and try to find evidence for that because I'm committed a priori to defending it. Instead, it's that you look into these things, you read these things, you find out about these things, and you say, gosh, it really looks like the locations in the Gospels are extraordinarily accurate, and some of them would have been difficult to understand or to know who these rulers were or what the geography was and so forth if you hadn't actually visited those places, or if you didn't actually happen to live close to the time and know these facts about these places, these rulers, and so forth. That makes it look like these documents are reliable. So it's driven from the data. It's driven from the bottom up. And a plethora of data, an embarrassment of riches of data, is the very opposite of a burden. Instead, it's an opportunity to recognize the strength of the case. So I wanted to make that point about epistemic routing and about the strangeness of considering maximalism to be a burden, because somehow, now you're committed to defending things, and that's really hard, and something's going to go really wrong if any one of them falls through. That's just the wrong way to look at it. And I speak as an epistemologist with a very special interest in epistemic routing and cumulative cases and so forth. But I'm trying to speak in a way that makes that very clear at a lay level. And I hope I've been able to do that today, and I will put the link to Jonathan's discussion with Tony in the show notes before this publishes, because that will exist before this publishes, even though it doesn't exist right now while I'm recording this because it hasn't been recorded yet. Okay, please come back to the Lydia McGrew channel where we're making common sense rigorous.